Okay, so in this episode of the Scenic Route, we're diving deep into our relationship with the unknown and letting go and just be open for life's mysteries. Together with my guest Jessica Ell, we'll explore how leaps of faith can lead to unexpected magic and why having clarity trumps certainty every goddamn time. So tune in as we challenge the status quo and learn why sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply move. So, you ready? Let's go.
Hi, and welcome to the Scenic Route Podcast, where we believe in embracing life's journey with purpose, curiosity, and a bit of potty humor. I'm one uncool mom, and I'm always looking out for that perfect slice of gluten-free rhubarb pie. Every week, I get the joy of sitting down with dreamers and doers who dare to take the road less traveled in pursuit of their own magic. Together, we dive into the inspiring stories of soulful entrepreneurs and visionary leaders who boldly share their beliefs, lessons, and fuck-ups. Excited? So am I. You're exactly where you're meant to be. And now, let's take this conversation off the beaten track.
Jessica Ell is a Martha Beck-certified life coach who specializes in helping people make hard decisions. She is especially interested in the good on paper things we choose to walk away from, and the loneliness of ambivalence and reluctance that often accompanies these choices, even when they feel spiritually aligned. Jessica, welcome to the Scenic Route Podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
This conversation today feels very timely. We have big astrological shifts coming up next year, and it's just like it feels the energies are a bit wild. So it feels really cool to talk about kind of like the relationship we have with faith and the kind of like the mystery of the unknown and when just kind of like rip off the band-aid. Where you're at currently, Jessica, do you feel like energy-wise, is this like something that's going on for you too?
Yes, the short answer is yes. And also, I feel like I have been in this state for so long, this state of
Never
I don't
ending.
know what's happening. And I am a Capricorn sun. So Pluto kind of going in and out of Capricorn for however the last 12 months, I don't know how long it's been.
Yeah.
That it's been transitioning out, but I have certainly felt the heaviness of that and then also the lightness when it goes into Aquarius.
Yes.
And it comes back.
Yes.
And I'm a cusper. I'm like the last day of Capricorn. And so I always kind of exist on that threshold of what's now and what's next. And I'm constantly kind of toggling between those two energies.
Girl, same. And it's always interesting when I'm like in a position of, oh, I don't really know how to move forward or what could be the next step, but I know what I don't want.
Yes, yes. I talk about that all the time because I almost never know. I almost never know where I'm going, but I'm very good at saying, well, I know it's not that. I know it's not this. And that's actually when I first got into coaching, I hired someone and I joined a group program. And this was during COVID. And my ex-husband and I had split up right before COVID. Like I moved into my own apartment the day before the lockdown started in the US. And in June, maybe it was in May, I signed up for a coaching program. And the first question that she asked was, what do you not want anymore? And I was like, oh, thank God someone is asking me a useful question and not just asking me what I want. Because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want.
I'm pondering this question for myself and with my clients so many times. And I'm truly torn about it. Like, curious to hear your thoughts. I'm like, yes, I feel it's very helpful to know what you don't want. So you're not repeating certain things. But at the same time, often feel I often feel like I'm missing the purpose and the clarity that comes with knowing what you want and like actively like moving towards that instead of going away from something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Does that
There's a
make sense?
tension. It does. There's such a tension. And especially because we're just like bludgeoned with this idea that we need to know all the time. Right. I think
Uh, but I really
there,
do like to know though.
of course we do. Of course we like to know. I would love to know. And I have simply had to make peace with the fact that I don't. And that said, I think that there is a lot of clarity that comes as you are moving and as you are encountering life. I don't know if you're into human design at all. And I know that's not, we weren't going to talk about
No,
astrology
well,
or
I mean, we
human design
can.
or anything, but
I'm a 5/1 projector.
okay, okay. And I'm a 3/5 generator.
Oh,
And
okay. We got interesting energies here.
uh-huh, uh-huh. So I mean, at least for me, I have an open G center.
Mm.
So I don't know. Do you have an open G?
I no, she's the identity, right? That's one
Yes.
of my only defined ones
Okay. Okay. So
because
you're
everything else is like
lucky
split
in
open.
that regard. At least you got a sense of direction.
Well, I got a sense of self, so I know if I'm kind of like focusing on me that things will work out in my
Mm-hmm.
favor as long as I'm kind of like true to my values and what I want, which is different in a whole lot of ways. But yeah, things define Chi Center.
So how do you use that then? Since you always know who you are, how do you use that then to kind of navigate, even if you don't know exactly where you're going? Because I could see that as being a tremendous asset in terms of a compass.
Um, it is. Um, I reframe it in the sense of I don't ask myself, what do I want? I ask myself, what do I need right now?
Hmm.
So I know from experience that I'm better at life in general, at making smarter decisions, being kinder, being more attuned to my values, etc., when I'm feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm rested, when I don't fill my body with shitty foods, not labeling food shitty foods, but like just balanced. Um, like all these little things I know will contribute. So if I say okay, I have just reframed to what do I need? And knowing that if it nurtures me feeling good, everything else will kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's where my chi then comes in.
Okay.
Not a human design expert, but
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, I think about, the difference between clarity and certainty. I guess to
mm,
go back to your initial question, I like to think of it because certainty is not available to me.
yeah.
I have an open G, and that means that my direction will never be clear and will never be certain. And when I heard that, I was
Mm.
like, well, I'm dissatisfied with this assessment. But it made sense. As I looked back on my life, I realized I'd spent years, and I still do, kind of battling and trying for this sense of certainty that was always elusive, that I never
Mm-hmm.
actually landed on. And I realized that a lack of certainty did not preclude clarity. And I think
Oh,
about it.
interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think about it as clarity to me means this is the path and
Mm-hmm.
I am going to follow it. I do not know where it leads, and I know that I must follow it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I feel that pull towards something, then I know that I am moving towards something interesting. I have no
Mm-hmm.
idea what it is, but I know
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like a magnet. It's just kind of like pulling you towards this direction. Mm.
Yes. Yes. And that can be very hard for people around you to understand. They're like, you're doing what? Why?
Yeah, like how could this possibly make sense?
How is that
Yes,
going to
been
work
there.
out for you? And I'm like, I don't know, man.
Like, geez, not like don't have a magic 8 ball with me. It's currently out of order.
Exactly. But then
Yeah.
think about, in contrast, the things that are socially common or culturally accepted and celebrated. It's like, okay, you're going to college. We know with certainty that you could finish that program in 4 years because it is laid out as such, right?
Yes.
We're certain. As long as you don't like smoke too much pot and you go to all your classes, you will graduate in 4 years. We're certain
Yes.
about that.
Yes.
And that's the kind of thing that we like. We like that
Yeah,
kind of
predictability.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so you said it yourself. You're on the path, and I think we're always on the path to embrace uncertainty. But like the discomfort of uncertainty can be really intense. Like
Yeah.
how can I help myself becoming more comfortable with the discomfort of uncertainty?
Yeah. I think two things.
Mm,
Number one, we kind of exist, if we're not conscious of it,
mm,
on a spectrum between hope and fear. We
mhm,
have hope on one side and we have fear on the other. And a lot of times when we're grappling with uncertainty and we feel that kind of emotional wave and that internal chaos, it's
mhm,
because some days we're believing the hopeful thoughts, and on other days we're believing the fearful ones. And so we're kind of just like pushed and pulled between those
mm,
two ends of the
mhm.
spectrum, which is a very disorienting and
Yeah, it can make you feel
uncomfortable
dizzy.
experience. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that one of the tools, of course, is just coming back to the present and realizing that this moment is all we have, right? Right
Mm-hmm.
now, the
Mm-hmm.
future is an illusion, and so is the past. Right now is literally all we have,
Mm-hmm.
eternity in this moment. So that's kind of like the spiritual perspective
Yeah.
on it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that was practically useful for me and has been for my clients is becoming willing to experience the negative things that you are afraid of on the other side of that uncertainty.
Oh, okay. Elaborate. Because I already hear like I can sometimes tune into my listeners and they're like, uh they're feeling this getting too uncomfortable, so they're kind of like setting the speed of the conversation at like 1.5 or 2, just kind of like get through it, but like no 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 no, you need to hear this. So please spell it again.
Yeah, yeah. So one of my favorite thinkers is Joseph Campbell. So you may
Mhm.
have heard of him. He's the mythologist and really interesting guy. And what he says is that the warrior's approach to life is to say yes to it all, say yay to it all. And
Mm.
that means everything, right? Like
Yeah.
the sorrow and the joy, the things you're
Yeah, the
afraid
full
of,
human experience.
all of it.
Mm.
And when you start to say, you know what, okay, I'm willing to experience this. And I'll give you a concrete example. I wrote fiction. I started writing fiction during COVID. And because I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a business writing novels, and that's how I'm going to make a bunch of money. And I've never written a book before, but I'll start now, and other people can do it. So can I. So I started writing novels,
That's the
and
generator energy. I love it. I'm so here for this.
then when it came time to publish the first one, I was like, oh shit. Uh People like will probably say bad things about my books on Amazon. Like they will probably write 1-star reviews, especially if I have the success that I want to have. Of
Mm.
course, there are going to be people who write negative things. And that like stopped me in my tracks for a while until I realized, okay, look, it's humiliation. That's what I was afraid of feeling. I think for
Mm.
so many people, the feeling of humiliation is like the worst possible thing, the worst
Mhm.
possible emotion. At
Well,
least
it's
it was for
super
me at the
closely
time.
tied to shame, and shame
Yeah.
is a really, really negative emotion from like
Mm-hmm.
energy skill wise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be publicly humiliated. And then I was like, oh my God, my colleagues will go on the internet and read these people trashing my work, and I will never survive that.
Or they're one of them trashing them with alongside them.
And ultimately I asked myself, I was like, okay, Jessica, are you willing to get 1-star reviews, because if you're not, you can't do this. If you're not willing to get a 1-star review, then pick a different plan, because you can't publish your books. And when I looked at it that way, I was like, okay, well, we know what we're going to do now. We're going to practice that willingness muscle. We're just going to
How
practice
did you, I'm curious, how did you practice being comfortable or being okay with humiliation?
I was very gentle with myself.
Mm.
I was very gentle with myself. I did not force myself to go read reviews. I still don't, because it isn't useful to me, right? It isn't useful. And I started to really, again, as I was saying, coming to the present moment, just starting to be really aware of what real life is. And it really isn't online. Real life really isn't online.
Yes.
And,
Agreed.
and so context, perspective, kind of taken a long view of my life. And here was another question I asked myself. I'm like, bitch, if you get to 90 years old and you find out that you did not publish your work because you were afraid someone was going to say bad things about you on Amazon, that is not a satisfactory answer for 90-year-old me. So kind of going to the end. So a lot of different mental...
asking future-wise, Jessica, Jen, like, okay, looking back, how big was this?
Yeah. And it's about, I think willingness really is about not letting fear drive your decisions.
Yeah, 100%, which again requires for a lot of unconditioning work for some people, because you might even not know that your decisions are fear-based.
Right, because fear often sounds very logical.
Oh, okay. How is fear disguised? And what kind of what are costumes?
What are its costumes? Oh, practicality, responsibility.
Oh, yes.
Safety.
Smart.
Smart.
Doing what's smart.
Yeah. Doing what's rational, doing what's going to, set you up in the clearest, best path. Right? This is obviously the best path to a good future.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So
it's what
the law degree, becoming a doctor or something whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
So a lot of the things the good on paper things, maybe too, this is the thing that just makes sense, like the law degree or the
law degree,
your next education, your next online course. If you're an entrepreneur, you're like, oh, this just makes so much sense.
Yes, it makes sense. And I think we talked a little bit about this. My first big decision, my first kind of deviation onto the scenic route, as if you will, was when I decided not to go to law school. I had a seat at one of the top 10 schools in the US with a significant scholarship. And I'd gotten into almost every other school in that tier. And I ended up not going, but not after a year, not until I'd spent a year kind of deliberating and swinging wildly between hope and fear. And ultimately I didn't go. And it was the right decision for me, but I made it out of fear instead of, a deep knowing that I didn't want to be an attorney. I was afraid I couldn't cut it. So even though it looked like the right decision, like this is clear, it's certain, you're definitely going to land a good job, the fear part of me was like, okay, but you might not, right? Like, what if you can't cut it? Like, I'm not sure you're even smart enough to be there in the first place. Maybe this is all a fluke. Like, all of the imposter syndrome really started coming up. And what convinced me, like the very convincing lie, was that, well, it's irresponsible to take on that much debt, and you probably just shouldn't go. That's still, even with the scholarship, it's still a lot of debt. So, and the economy is bad because this was like in 2011. The economy is terrible. Legal jobs are being bled from all the major firms, all of these kinds of things. And you can come up with facts to support any position.
Oh God, yes.
You know, and that's what my brain was gathering at that time.
Yeah. Your brain is very good in like confirming your whatever you kind of like want to believe. That's the way you, if you're pregnant, for example, you suddenly only see pregnant women because it reaffirms.
Right. Yeah, the reticular activating system for
But
sure.
I'm curious, something you said just before. You made a right decision for yourself, although the decision itself was fear-based. So fear is not just the bad guy we kind of like paint it to be. Like it has a role of keeping us safe, and it helped you make the right decision.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? You know, as I look back on that, I wish that I had made that decision from a place of courage instead of a place of fear, even though it would have been the same. It still would have been like, hey, I'm not going to go. I'm going to go kind of blaze my own path here. But making it from fear, what that ended up doing to me over the next 15 years was I just kind of stopped believing in myself. I was like, oh, you let that opportunity get away because you were too afraid. And that became a stick that I used to beat myself with. Like, you know, gosh, what did I say to myself? You know, you're too fearful, you're too afraid. And was just kind of bullying myself with that, which didn't ever make me less afraid of things. You know, of course it never does.
Shaming yourself into anything is never gonna work. Just
right.
Spoiler.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think, you know, if I could go back in time and have a conversation with myself, I think I would have just pointed out, like, hey, you're trying to convince yourself to do something that you don't really want to do. You don't really want to go to law school. And this whole saga has been about trying to convince yourself that it's safe to go. But that fearful part of your brain is like offering you kind of silly reasons. Because I would have been fine. I would have gone. I would have gotten
Would
a
you
job.
like?
I would have been fine.
Yeah. Would you have died? No, probably not. Like
it would have been fine. But I think that, you know, the essential self, the wise part of me was like, oh no, we can't let her go. So let's just offer her all these crazy reasons, these unrealistic reasons that seem so responsible, that seem so rational. The economy's bad. You know, that's a lot of money to take out in student loans, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I mean, this is the ambiguity, right? I mean, there are instances where those reasons are totally legit. Like if you wouldn't have had a scholarship, if you wouldn't have like if you're not coming from like generational wealth or whatever, like those could be totally legit reasons to not do something. So it's always really I guess it comes down to being really honest with yourself, what is bullshit and what is not.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
ultimately only you can tell.
So true. And if I had actually wanted to be an attorney and the economy was terrible and the money was a problem and all of those things, guess what? I would have gone to a cheaper school. I would have found some school where I could have gotten a free ride. And that's what I would have done. And that's what I'm talking about. Like when you have a path that you know you're meant to be on, it's easy to do whatever it takes to follow it. You know, and I think for a lot of us, we just don't have that experience, or we haven't had the experience of finding that path because we're so often following someone else's.
Very true. And again, this is not like a conscious thing, right? We often are in the belief that this is our path. And it's only when we're doing certain reflective work that we're like, oh, wait a minute. Like, do I actually want this thing? Or has this, I don't know, is it more, am I conditioned to want this thing?
Yeah. or am I persuading myself, right? Because often too, and I just went through this myself this year. I went through a period, my dad got cancer last year, and I moved back to my hometown to manage his treatment. And I left my hometown for a reason 15 years ago. And I didn't expect to be back here, but it's been a good year. And for the last 6 months, I was kind of like, oh, you know what? I should just stay and remain close to my family. And I had a lot of reasons, a lot of reasons. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I love being close to them. And, you know, when you start to persuade yourself, right? And you don't even realize it, like you were saying, that you're lying to yourself. And what finally clicked in for me was that I call it the mist of unease, right? Like I just felt uneasy.
I see the novelist thing there. Yes. Okay.
But that's how it felt, right? I think sometimes we think about intuition as like a sudden flash of insight or a sudden knowing. And for me, that does happen. And also, when I am deep into persuading myself about something, because I'm experiencing a values conflict, when two parts of me that I love and respect are in conflict with each other, and I start to persuade myself, everything just kind of gets gray. Like my whole life just feels like I'm walking through a Scottish Highland mist kind of vibe. And it's very easy to miss, like to not even realize that it's happening because it's so subtle until one day you're like, God damn, it's been cloudy for 6 months.
Yeah, all is black and white suddenly when it just started like decolorizing slowly and slowly.
Yeah.
Wasn't this like this movie Pleasantville or something? Where
That's exactly what I think about. Yes.
Okay, good. Glad we're on the same pop culture level here.
Yes, exactly. No, that's how I experience it. That's how
interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we're moving or kind of like moving to intuition. How does like your intuition play into making decisions for yourself?
I have a long relationship with intuition in the sense that like for the first 25 years of my life, I didn't believe I had any. When people would say, trust your gut or trust your intuition, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, I've never experienced this sensation that you are talking about.
Yeah.
Until one night in the summer of, I think it was 2014, I was really grappling with a hard decision. It was a personal relationship situation. And I was just losing my mind over this decision. And people were telling me to trust my gut. And I was like, I don't know what the hell that means. So I Googled it. I Googled how to trust your intuition.
Oh, what did Google say?
Well, let me ask first. Do you have, well, you're a projector, so you don't have a sacral response.
No, and I'm actually a self-defined projector.
Okay. So what is your experience of intuition?
I don't know, maybe it goes back to the defined G, but I just know.
You just know.
And and it's really the knowing is really in the second brain and the gut. But sometimes it's harder to hear, or harder to believe what you're hearing. And as I have two defined centers, the G and the throat. Well, hello, podcast. So whenever I'm not really sure if it's my intuition talking or some conditioning or whatever, I talk to myself. And then it gets really clear fast, just the way I talk and what kind of words I use, if I'm persuading myself to do something XYZ, or if it's actually what I want, or what my inner voice is telling me.
Yeah, I think intuition is so tricky. So when people say just trust your intuition, they never say that it's hard to do, because it is. Like there's one thing to hear it.
It is and it isn't. Like
I think taking action based on intuition is an incredibly faithful thing to do.
Yes, that's a different ball game. There are a lot of people who listen to their intuition and who hear their intuition, but do not take action on it.
So they're not really trusting it then.
I suppose so. Yeah,
If you
you could
trusted
say
it, you
that.
just do it, right?
True.
I think that's the practice. Like, and as you
Probably the
get
practice is really
older,
trusting it. You first need to hear it to trust it, but then you need to trust it enough to actually take action, right? Because
yep,
you said it so beautifully before, clarity comes from moving, right? Anything, all the you can like do vision boards as long as until you get like old, as long as you don't move on anything.
and yeah, it's not real. And I mean, I don't know how much traveling you've done, but every time I get to a place, I'm like, oh, this is great. And it's also not what I thought it was going to be. It's not what I imagined it was going to be. So my vision, when I get those things, I'm like, oh, this isn't quite universe. Is this what I ordered? Because it's not the experience that I
I
thought
did
it was
not
going to
sign
be.
up for this. Please exchange.
Exactly. And you only find that out when you experience it. You get that clarity
Yeah.
when you live it.
Yeah, that reminds me. I think it's 4 years ago now, when I was like, okay, and I know I need to address some shit, and I have no idea on addressing that. Like I did not grow up having I haven't been mirrored how to deal with emotions and all these like murky bits. And so I was like, okay, we got to try different things. Just kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And it was really interesting. There were like some things where I'm like, sound healing? Like, what the hell is that? Like, that is stupid. I'm like, not gonna do this. But then I said, no, I'm gonna just try everything once. And I was sobbing like a baby, and I was releasing so much through that one sound healing work session. It was insane. So you never know until you try. I never thought sound healing would have any effect on me, like whatsoever. It's like, no, no. I'm too logical for this. My mind is too smart for this. Whatever, blah, blah, blah. No. The body
Isn't
knew.
that's so funny? Oh, I'm too smart for this. I
I
think
know the trick behind this or something. Yeah.
right.
Oh,
I know logically how this works, and
yeah.
therefore,
So I'm
like,
not falling into the trap. Thank you.
you can't fool me. But I think, to come back to intuition, right? And how know that it's speaking to you and how to trust it. I Googled how to trust your intuition.
Yeah.
First thing that popped up was an article on an Oprah magazine. And I was not an Oprah fan. She was just kind of like there. She existed, but I wasn't a huge Oprah person.
Yeah.
But this woman named Martha Beck had written an article about how to trust your intuition. And I was like, I don't know who this lady is. But she had an exercise kind of laid out in this article. And I was like, all right, this sounds like shit, but I'll do it. Like, this sounds stupid.
That's me, like with the sound, it sounds like shit. That's not going to work out. Let's just give it a try.
Right. I'm like, no, I need to think my way to an answer.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, girl, been there. Like, I'm going to just rationalize this.
Exactly. Even though I'd been trying to do that for,
Did it work? No, it did not.
No, it did not. And I did the exercise, and I had the exact physical experience that she said I would have. And I was like, oh, what
Goody.
is this? What is
sorcery?
This? Exactly. What is this sorcery? And that sent me down a path of, I read all of Martha's books, and I, completed her life coach training.
Yeah.
And that, in terms of things you never expect to happen, like you never thought you were going to get into sound healing. I never thought I was going to become a life coach, like never, ever. And, though it worked, and it gave me the toolbox that she gave me in terms of that lesson on trusting your intuition. That was just one piece, right? Our intuition, I think, speaks to us in multiple ways. It's not just one thing. You might have a physical response to something. And another time you might have like what you call that just knowing. I experienced that too. And that's almost the harder thing to trust because you can't explain it. You're like, I just know. I just
But the thing
know.
again, do you need to explain it though?
Well, we think we need to explain it to other people.
But
When we're
do we really?
no, we don't.
Like, no, bitch, we don't. But yes, I mean, I know it is, right? When you do something that seems crazy, that's probably, I don't know, I'm curious if how your like families and friends and peers reacted to you deciding not going to law school, because it can be really an isolating experience when you're like, no, I'm not going to do this. And everyone's like, she, she
They
has lost her mind.
yes, it was that. It was
Oh,
exactly that.
sorry.
And my parents, they didn't go to college. And for me to have gotten into this tier of school and to have gotten scholarships, they're like, what are you doing? They
You're
really thought that
throwing your life away, baby girl.
exactly. And I was like, no, it's going to be fine. I got a job at a nonprofit and they're going to pay me $13 an hour. And they, to their credit, they did not punish me for that decision, quote unquote, punish me,
Mhm.
right? They didn't give me
Mhm.
a hard time. They didn't, like ice me out or criticize me or anything like that.
Mhm.
But they were disappointed.
Mhm.
And for a long time, I kind of watched other people's lives, like I had friends in med school and, I'd watch their lives progress down these kind of clear tracks. And I'd be
Yeah.
like, what are you doing, Jessica? That could have been you.
Yeah, you
That
could
could have
have
been
been
you.
now the freshman year, the sophomore year. Yeah. Mm.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, but, you know, I always thought I made the right decision. And in hindsight, so many things. This is like they say, I call it reverse engineering magic because you can't know what's going to happen. Anytime someone says, well, don't worry about the how, I remember being like, I'm sorry. How am I supposed to do anything if I'm not thinking about the how? Like this is dumb.
Oh, I love this. Yes, yes. Spiritual guidance 101.
Right? Don't worry about the how. And I'm like,
It just will
bitch.
roll out, fall into place. Just remove the ego, remove the timing, and let everything fall into its place. And when you're new at when you're at the beginning of your spiritual journey or whatever you want to call it, you're like, bitch, shut the fuck up.
Exactly. So here is my guidance for those people. So the past me, reverse engineer the magic in your life. And like
Explain.
take
Yeah.
something that seems magical, that seems great, something about your life that you love, and walk it backward. Like walk back through the events and the opportunities that led to that thing happening in your life. And at
Mm.
some point, you will find something in that chain of events that you could not have predicted, that you could not have expected, and said, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? This person from my past life is going to call me and they are going to offer me this role in this city for this money doing XYZ thing that I am totally
Yeah, or
unqualified to
gonna
do.
recommend my book to someone influential with a bigger audience, or just something wildly crazy that you're like, no, could not have thought about this.
Well, and you could never have even, you truly could not have imagined it. It's not
Hmm.
even that you could imagine it and it was highly improbable. It's likely to be something that you simply could not have even conceived of.
There's really left eye, like left side. It's just coming out of nowhere almost. Like,
Yes.
interesting. Yeah.
Yes. And that to me, once I started to do that with my life, I was like, oh, this is what they mean. I could not have predicted how this would happen. This is what they're talking about. They're talking
Mm.
about those completely unexpected things. And the trick is to just work at what you can see in front of you, right? Bring your
Yeah.
absolute best to whatever is in front of you today and just keep doing that. And then eventually these like magic diversions pop up. And
Yeah.
that's how it happens. That's the
That's kind of
how.
like where the whole, I think that's the only true bit of the whole consistency thing, right? Just keep doing something long enough. But as you've said, if if you've never experienced a payoff before, right? It is a really a tough walk that you're relying just simply on faith that this thing you're doing, that this thing that you're giving your all to it, and your all doesn't mean hustle yourself to the ground for it. Uh, we're not doing that. But how can we keep up that the strength that is required to keep carrying on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's number one, you don't have to be consistent at shit that you hate, right?
Yes, that's why most diets fail because you cannot yeah, will
Because it
yourself into
sucks.
doing things you hate doing for the rest of your fucking life.
You can't,
Like, no, no.
you can't do it forever. So like give
Yeah. Also,
yourself permission.
there's no joy and fun in that. Oh, maybe that's one of the keys. Just really look at the things that bring you joy and fun and feel light.
And if you don't know what those things are, then take some pressure off, right? Like I think we're so, and I am so guilty of this, right?
No, we're all like, it takes one
It,
to know one, please.
like I'm so guilty of like, okay, but how is this going to make me money? But but how am
Yeah,
I
this thing is cute, but like I'm gonna pay my bills.
right? How am I supposed to make money doing this? I just recently started bedazzling my books. So I've got my fiction novels and I was like, ooh, it'd be kind of fun to bedazzle these. Like, I wonder if I
Fancy.
could sell these. And then so I got
Oh,
on
like
Etsy.
bedazzled special edition collector
You
editions.
absolutely can sell them on Etsy.
I mean, girl, you can sell literally anything. There are people who buy bottled air and like used panties and like whatever kind of crazy things there are, right? Like,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. So absolutely. But that was not the point. I was just trying to find something to do that was like fun and intentionally not about making money because we put so much pressure on
Mm.
ourselves to like even find the path, right? Or even to like do more joyful things. And I'm like, God damn it, I've got to do something joyful today.
I, yeah, oh God. Oh yeah, this I can relate with like with doing, like meditation things. When I was at the beginning of my meditation practice, I was really like, bitch, you gotta fucking do this meditation right now, or you're like not chill. It's like, oh, that's probably not the point of this exercise. But hey, okay, let's
Yes.
try again
Well,
tomorrow.
because spirituality, it's like I don't even know. I'm sure there are think pieces written about this, but spirituality now being used as like all about making money. Like every spiritual
It's late
practice
stage
is
capitalism fucking everywhere, and it's
yeah,
awful.
yeah. And you know, you get I know it's easy to say and hard to do, but like you have to do things just for the doing of it, not because it's going to get you to an end. And I
Yeah,
think if you
that's
can
why it's called the
find
Scenic Route, bitch.
yes. Okay. I want to say one of my favorite, I guess she's a celebrity, but I see her as just a thinker more than that, is Jane Fonda, which I realize might be weird for some people.
No, why? She's a fucking icon.
Like, and the way she has lived her life,
Hmm.
she's had a life of so much variety and so many different chapters. Her autobiography is one of my favorite reads.
Hmm.
And I just think, that's the point. The point is not to find the fastest way, the most linear way to make money and then die rich. That is not the point. The point is to live an interesting life, right? With a lot of chapters, with a lot of different experiences. And some of that, I think, especially if you're in a place where things feel drab, because I've certainly been there. I'm like, my whole life is just drab right now. Some of the work starts with like, well, hey, what am I interested in reading today? Not to improve myself, not to
Yeah.
change
Not
anything.
another like entrepreneurship book or time management book or just
Yeah.
what do I actually want to fucking read today?
Yeah. Yeah. I just actually bought myself a scooter because there's a skate park not far from my house.
Ooh, fun.
And I was like, looking at all these kids, I'm like, that looks like fun.
Oh,
So
it
I bought
does.
myself a scooter. It got here today. And I cannot monetize my scooting. Okay. I'm just going to
Well,
go
I mean,
do
you
it for
could make
fun.
funny TikToks. Just throwing it out there.
You're right. Everything is monetizable.
Yes, I
Yeah.
know, it's awful. But I know, right? Like people go back to having a hobby, just a
Just,
fun pastime
yes.
you do for
Yes.
the funsies of it.
And you don't have to put it on the internet and you don't have to tell people that you're doing it. You can just, I don't know, do some things on the weekends. Just do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Just don't get up at 5 in the morning to do it if you don't want to get up at five in the
If you're
morning.
not a morning person. If you're
Please
not a morning
don't.
person.
Like the 5 a.m. club. I cannot. Like I don't like
Oh, see, and I'm a morning person, but I also go to bed
good
at
for
8:30.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you. I'm like, I I also like mornings, but if I know like the 5 a.m. club where you like get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and have a cold shower and everything, like I'm like, no.
Well, okay. So years ago, when I was working in real estate and running a real estate company, I got this weird idea in my head. I don't know. I was unwell. I was unwell. I was
Mm,
like, I need to be in the office at 6 a.m. So I have 2 hours of uninterrupted work time before anyone
mm.
calls me, before the team comes in. So I started waking up at 3:30 in the morning so that I could journal and go to the gym and do my meditations and then shower and be at my desk at 6 a.m. And I thought I was the baddest bitch. And now I look back, I'm like, you were unwell. You
Yeah.
were not a well woman at that point in time. There was a lot of stuff going on that wasn't right.
Wow. And that, yeah, that's a really important realization, but I imagine also a hard one.
Yeah, because we often, I think, when our
Mm,
lives aren't working the way we want them to, we're like,
mm,
oh, you know what? I just need to go back to what I used to do that worked for me. Right.
mm-hmm.
Like, and
Yeah.
usually, I think the first time you try things, like the first time you go on a diet, because we mentioned that earlier,
Mm,
it probably worked decently well. Right. And you're like,
yeah.
oh, okay, I could do this
Yeah,
for
sure. You lost
60
probably you
days.
lost a few pounds. You're like, okay, this
That
is good.
worked.
Hmm.
I was only eating 1,200 calories a day, but it worked. And so now that I've gained 10 pounds, the answer is I've got to go back to eating 1,200 calories a
Yeah.
day. Right. But each time you go back to those old solutions and those old tools, I find that they work less well. There are diminishing returns each time you try to go back
Mm.
to a hyper rigid structure or hyper rigid tool. And your adherence is not quite as long. You just can't take it.
Yeah,
And
and
it sucks.
it might not the same goes with like I don't know spiritual tools that work well for you or like journaling or going to your like thought like therapist. Like it's your everything you do, everything that you experience, you're always changing. You're always becoming a different person. So something that might have worked for you in the past, however well, might not work as well today.
So true. You're just different. You're just
Mm.
different. I've had to change up my journaling practice significantly. And sometimes there have been periods where I'm like, oh, I wish the old thing just worked. I wish it just worked the way it used to. But you're right. You change.
Yeah, and then you have a nostalgia filter where you're like, oh, everything was so bad, was so much better back in the days, and like, nah.
That's such a good reminder, like especially when you're hating where you are. It's like just remember, like the thing that you were so nostalgic for at that point in time, you were also probably itching to get out of it.
Yeah.
And it's just such a good reminder to be like, you know what, you don't have to fix all your problems today. You can just kind of enjoy your life because
Yeah.
back when things were so great, you were also unhappy. So maybe you should just fix the unhappiness and not try to
Yeah,
get
the
out
root
of it.
cause.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. Like really look at, okay, what is actually going on and like, yeah, not just like fixing symptoms.
instead of running off to like the next job. I think people do that in jobs a lot. The next job will
Mm.
be better. No, probably not.
Yeah, or relationships probably
Oh,
too.
yeah. Yeah. Jobs and relationships. They're basically the
Mm.
same thing. The same kind of patterns show up in both.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Oh, this is, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. The whole looking back thing, maybe as a closing thought on the concept of like regret, right? We had it, we mentioned a couple of times in our conversation, like we're looking back and only in hindsight, like we gain so much wisdom in hindsight. And this is true, and it's also important. Also, sometimes it doesn't matter. But I always find it's very tricky when we come into regret. Oh, like, oh, I should have done this, or I should have gone to law school, or I should have done this. What's your take on regret when we're looking at these things, especially what we've talked about in like uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
My take is that we're only regretting something because we're not liking where we are right now. So we say, okay, if I would have chosen a different path, I unconsciously imply that whatever else I would have done would be better than where I'm at now.
Right. We assume that the path not taken would be like sunshine and daisies. And of course, we don't know that to be true. But I have a gentler view of
Mm,
regret than I used to, because I used to be very opposed. Like for the longest time, I wouldn't say, like, hey, I do wonder what would have happened if I
hmm
had gone to law school. There is a part of me that regrets. There is a part of me that's curious. And now I just think, you know what? Like, there is room for all of that on the table. We get one round of this version of this life. You cannot experience everything. You cannot experience all the paths that are available to you. So you might as well just make peace with, hey, there are going to be some choices that I didn't choose. And it's okay to wonder about them. It's okay to wonder, like, hey, maybe I should have done that. Maybe you should have, but you didn't. So here you are. And
Yeah,
I
that was the
think,
right decision at that time. You always
yeah,
make the best decisions, do the best things at the time given with who you are, all the information you have available to you. You made the right call at that time.
right. And it's based on who you were. And so looking back from the perspective of 5 years, you're a different person today. So
Mm.
what you would do today really has no bearing on what
Mhm.
5 years ago did. But I also think, I call it future regrets because I used to be paralyzed by the fear of future regret.
Mm.
Like, oh my God, am I going to regret this decision? Am I going to regret that? But if I do this, then that. And like, I was just paralyzed by that.
Mm.
And, what I've had to do is really, I think you just make peace with it. You confront those regrets head on, right? Like you
Mm.
really address them. And then you think about, like I was saying with the Amazon reviews and being humiliated. I went forward and I was like, am I going to regret not publishing my books for this specific reason?
Mm.
And the answer was yes. And that made the path pretty clear for me. So I think anytime you can address those regrets head on, then at least you've got it on paper, right? Then you know what you're really dealing with
Mm.
instead of letting it chase itself around in your mind.
Mm. That's in general very sound life coaching advice. But yeah, really like really get it out on paper. Like maybe to recap all the like if you just like fast forward until now, like no, go back, listen to the whole thing. But anyway, um too long, didn't listen. Um recap what you want, like bring it out of just your mind in any way you can. Like I shared that I need to talk things out because the fine throat, hello. Others can do with that with journaling. Like I can't by the life of me, but whatever kind of way you find bringing it out into the world and keep your mind from spinning in endless cycles and circles, and then acting on it.
Yeah.
Right? As you've said, clarity for anything, clarity about your values, your direction, your anything comes from moving, from actually doing the thing.
From doing it. And I think too, with regret, understanding what you regret from your past can be incredibly illuminating about your future. So if you regret not taking chances, if you regret holding yourself back, if you regret staying in relationships too long, all of those things, there's so much data about how you can guide your decisions in the future. And if, all of those kind of talking it out, writing it on paper, I have a free quiz on my website called the Future Regrets Finder Quiz that kind of walks you through my process of how I look for those. So that's at jessicaell.com/quiz if anyone's interested in that.
We're going to link it in the show notes. That's thank you for doing the perfect segue into ending this episode for me, Jessica. Because I'm like, oh shit, I got to be mindful of the time. This happens always. So I'm gonna link this quiz in the show notes. If you've been intrigued with what Jessica shared with us today, go do the quiz. If people want to hear more of you or want to read your books, where can people find you? Where do you hang out?
So I hang out on social media. I am just on Instagram at the Jessica Ell. And then my website and podcast and all that other stuff is at jessicaell.com.
Perfect. I like a central hub for anything. Before I let you go, I'll have one last question. What book are you currently reading, or what audiobook you're currently listening to?
I am reading Britney Spears' autobiography right now.
Oh, I heard many good things about it. It's also on my list.
Yeah, I am enjoying it. And I read Mariah Carey's over the winter. And it's so interesting to see and to hear about that experience that we see so publicly. To hear about the internal experience of it is like really fascinating. What we see outside versus what is happening inside.
Yeah, I feel everyone remembers like the Britney Spears shaved head.
Yes.
Period.
I'm right at that point.
Oh, goody. Okay, yes, it's moving up on my get to read list. And yeah, as always, if you're like this, it will also be linked in the show notes, and it's also going on the Scenic Route Book Club page. So whenever you're finished what you're reading right now, go have a look. Awesome guests read awesome books. So Jessica, thank you so much for being on the Scenic Route with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer.
And just like that, we've reached the end of another journey together on the Scenic Route Podcast. Thank you for spending time with us. Curious for more stories or in search of the resources mentioned in today's episode? Visit us at scenicroutepodcast.com for everything you need. And if you're ready to embrace your scenic route, I've got something special for you. Step off the beaten path with my Scenic Route Affirmation Card Deck. It's crafted for those moments when you're seeking courage, yearning to trust your inner voice, and eager to carve out a path authentically, unmistakably yours. Pick your Scenic Route affirmation today and let it support you. Excited about where your journey might lead? I certainly am. Remember, the Scenic Route is not just about the destination, but the experiences, learnings, and joy we discover along the way. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you on the Scenic Route again.